Hi there folks, and welcome back to the channel. This is the second in the series of narrated remote country wild fishing articles I wrote in the dim and distant past, and is presented here as a video. There is no actual video, of course, or at least none from the time of originally writing, but plenty of photos. A kind of illustrated talk really. These trips took place before shooting personal video with action cameras was practical or even possible. This time we visit the Sandy Loch on the north side of Lochnagar, one of Scotland's most famous and celebrated hills, overlooking Royal Deeside. It is a magnificent location, a hefty hike, and we even catch some fish. The image on your screen now, which is also the thumbnail, was taken from a video with the permission of Charlie McCartney and shows the Sandy Loch and Lochnagar from high on the hill. Charlie has his own excellent Scottish hillwalking YouTube channel where he and his brother Mike carry out huge walks in a day that most folks would take many days to complete. These guys are amazingly fit. A link to Charlie's channel can be found in the video description. I urge you to check it out. The Sandy Loch is the smaller, distant rounded loch. The closer corrie loch below the cliffs is Lochnagar, or Loch of the Birds. There are no records of fish in this loch, and at a height of just under 3,000 feet above sea level, it might just be a little too high. Please remember that fishing is a private property right, and permission to fish all of these waters, mentioned in these videos, should be sought from the relevant estates. So anyway, let's get the boots on and head for the hill. It's a grand day for it. Rocky Mountain high, but we're in Scotland, I'm afraid, not Colorado. However, make no mistake, these hills are most definitely rocky, and the Sandy Loch is high, at least by Scottish standards anyway. At 2,653 feet, the loch I'm talking about is possibly the highest trout water in Scotland, and certainly one of the highest to reliably hold decent-sized trout. Before I start, let me address one very important point. Some will delight in articles like this, and others will worry about additional pressures they could bring to a fragile environment. A justified concern for sure, and one I battled with long and hard when deciding to publish these videos. There is always a difficult balance to strike between openness, conservation, and elitism. There is certainly a risk in publishing information on wild places, especially if access is easy. However, had it not been for the past writings of people like Seton Gordon and Dr. Adam Watson, much historical information on these places would certainly have been lost, and that would be to their overall detriment. As far as the Sandy Loch goes, the gruelling 12-mile round-trip hike over very difficult ground and the brutal 1,600-foot climb just to catch a few small trout will, I hope, ensure that only those lovers of wild places with good intentions visit it. It's a long way to go just to drop a beer can or plastic bottle or dump an unwanted little tent. The more people who value these places the better, and the less likely they are to be covered in wind turbines and pylons or suffer similar abuse. If you go there or to any other remote place, please act responsibly. Ask for permission to fish, practice catch and release, and leave no trace of your visit. Leave only footprints, take only photographs. I really can hardly believe the events in this brief account took place over 14 years ago. Back on the 8th of July 2011, when I was younger and a heck of a lot fitter. But even back then it had been 30 years since I had first been up there. I fished here a few times in the 1970s after a work colleague told me about it. He mentioned the magic words, good trout and a hard day out. Back then I was really a small stream angler, and to some extent that's still the case. But then I have to be honest, in those days I was pretty clueless about hill loch fly fishing and had limited success. So anyway, let's jump back to 2011 and see what I can remember. My previous visits had all been back in those carefree youthful days where all that mattered was where your next trout and next beer were coming from. In fact, those important things were often connected as our local publican in Arbroath enjoyed getting the odd fish or two from us, and we were often rewarded for this courtesy by way of a pint or a dram or two. I had been meaning to fish here again for years, but it's a long, hard day, quite arduous, a 12-mile round trip with 1,600 feet of ascent and descent, and I could never find anyone daft enough to accompany me. Remember, this was in the days before emergency personal satellite communications devices, and while I did often go out alone, I knew the terrain here, and it was not a place to have an accident without by yourself. A twisted ankle, or worse, could be very serious, and remember, this is not Monroe bagging on busy hills, where other walkers are frequently met. Get injured here and you're on your own. Anyway, enter Joe. Now all who know Joe will confirm he's a heck of a nice guy. Keen as mustard, fit as a fiddle, fishing mad and up for most things, but above all daft enough to jump at the chance of joining me on such a perfectly reckless fishing trip. We had first planned to go up to the loch on Sunday, but Joe was booked to fish Dunalister that day, so we simply swapped days. Loch of the Weary Legs today, Dunalister on Sunday when boats were available. Perfect. Joe, my old collie Susie and I left the car park at 8 AM and struck directly uphill. The first part of the trek goes through native pine forest. It's quite lovely and there were lots of excuses to stop for rests and photos. The track is good and much of it, other than the last few miles, is drivable with a 4x4, but vehicle access is strictly prohibited and locked off. Just as well, really, the best defence a loch can have against overfishing is the need for many long hard miles of self-propulsion and buckets of blood, sweat and tears. The views through the forest seem to take your mind off the relentless climb, with great vistas over the Cairngorms, classic locations like the famous Victoria Bridge spanning a waterfall, red deer in the woods and views of the outlying tops of Lochnagar. It's brutal and unrelenting. Eventually the track ends and the open pathless hill and bog have to be tackled. Some of these huge pines are hundreds of years old and shelter lots of wildlife, from massive wood ant mounds to capercaillie, deer, pine marten and golden eagle. Crossing the moor was hard going. Joe was well out in front. I stumbled across a ringoozle nest with chicks, and while plant life seemed pretty dull and uniform, there was the odd blink of floral light here and there, with chickweed wintergreen, Trientalis europea, shining through the heather. It would be very easy to get lost up here in poor weather. It is massively exposed, and a sudden blizzard or hill fog could lead to great confusion on the uneven terrain, with its many ups and downs, hummocks, hillocks, peat hags and gullies. If you ever find yourself lost in such a situation, following a stream downhill might be your best option. We made very good time. Using Naismith's rule, I had calculated it would take between 2¼ and 2½ hours. It took 2 hours and 20 minutes. I was pleased with that, considering we were carrying fishing gear in addition to just walking gear and food. It's probably worth mentioning the rather odd name of this hill range, although many will already know this. Lochnagar is one of Scotland's best loved hills, but of course this was not the original name. A loch is a loch and a hill is a hill. This apparent absurdity was the result of Lord Byron's famous and much loved verse, Dark Lochnagar. Lochnagar is actually the name of a small tarn that lies in the northeast corrie of the hill. The name has come to be used for the entire hill. As you can see from the old map now on your screen, this hill was originally called Ben Heachan, or the Breast Hill. A very descriptive name indeed, and not an uncommon usage in the Highlands. I had forgotten the utter magnificence of the setting. This at least equals anything anywhere in Scotland, and best of all we had the place to ourselves. It was warm, still and humid when we arrived, and fish were rising. It was looking good. Quickly we tackled up. The rising fish were in a picky mood and would not look at the dry flies we placed over them. We didn't have time to experiment. This is Scotland after all. Suddenly a strengthening breeze got up, shifted into the north. Without warning it turned very cold and the loch died. If only we had been here an hour earlier. Sod's law. It was too cold to sit around, so we headed for the lee shore in the hope of finding some shelter. We changed to wet flies, but still with no success. Then Joe suddenly started catching a few on a Peter Ross. Luckily I had no Peter Rosses in my box, and thus was delivered from any temptation to use my Jinx fly. I tied on the far more acceptable Butcher on a size 10, and I started getting a few fish as well, although I had a heck of a job keeping them on for very long. You seem to get days like that when fish after fish is lost. They did come though, and you would have hardly believed some of them were high loch fish, light colours and well proportioned. These looked more like trout from a lowland river. To be fair, some of the bigger ones were a bit lean, but this is a high loch after all, where winter is king for 8 months of the year. They also fought in an odd manner, all of them. No deep diving runs. These trout splashed, spun and twirled on the surface. We fished for about 6 hours. It was hard to stop looking at the magnificent surroundings. This is high mountain country on a small scale. There's another loch nearby, on or around the 3,000 foot contour. It's called Lochnagar, or Loch of the Birds, and is reputedly fishless. I've never fished it, so can't comment. Might it hold Arctic char? Perhaps, but that's another question, and it's a loch for a much warmer day. A short diversion from fishing now, just to say these hills are some of the best walking hills in Scotland. If you don't fancy fishing, you could bag what might be the easiest 5-minute row round there is. I've marked them on the map. You would not tackle them from here though. Drive from Ballater to Spittal of Glenmick, pay a king's ransom for car parking, then take the track northwest up to the Bealach between Corbett, Connacht-Craig and Lochnagar. Strike directly up to the quarry. The path then climbs and skirts the quarry edge all the way around to Lochnagar summit, Cap Cairn Beck, or the Little Shit Cairn. From there head southwest along the top of the cliffs to the Stewie, then south to the summit of Cairn a Corrie Voyach, or the Hill of the Beautiful Corrie. From there choose the most obvious route over Cairn Taggart Beck to Cairn Taggart Moor, the big hill of the priest. There is a crashed aircraft on this hill, which is interesting. From here you cross the top of the Duloch Corrie, then breeze up Cairn Banach, the hill of the cake, then over to the final summit of Broad Cairn. The descent is on a good track, down the zigzags to Loch Mick, and then back to the car park. A fine high-level stroll that anyone of moderate fitness should manage. For accurate stats and a more detailed route, including safety information, which is very important, please refer to the Whitemouth Munro's entry on the Excellent Walk Highlands website. Back to fishing. I got a bit bored with pulling wet flies and tied on a large dry fly. A terrestrial pattern of my own design and tying. I call it Naomi. I won't go into the reason for that name for fear of cancellation. I fished along the margins below a high bank and soon had my best fish of the day in the net. It would have easily made 2 pounds had it not been so thin. As I said previously, there were some good fish in the loch, but poor weather and a harsh environment probably means long spells of poor feeding, resulting in thin fish. Anyway, that fish and all the others we caught that day were safely returned to the Ricey home. We fished on for a time, but at last it was time to head for home. We had a long hike ahead, and by the time we got back to the car park it was 7 p.m. I for one was exhausted. A memorable day was rounded off with a memorable fish supper in Ballater, one of Scotland's finest. It probably seems a bit bizarre to non-anglers that we, to use a good old Scottish expression, knocked our pans in to catch a load of fish which we chucked back into the loch, then bought fish in Balliter and ate those. Well, my only explanation is this: there is far more to fishing than eating fish. Anyway, that's it. I hope you enjoyed your day with Joe, Susie and I at the wild Sandy Loch. If you stuck with me this long, then thank you very much. Hopefully there will be a few more videos of this type over the winter, and we will see you in the next one whenever that may be. Bye for now.